The cryogen error. Cold. Not the kind of cold you feel on winter mornings, not the bite of frost against skin. This was different. This cold lived inside bones, inside cells, inside the very idea of what it meant to be alive. Marcus Chen's first breath in 10,000 years tasted like metal and silence. His eyes opened to darkness so complete it felt solid. Then came the pain, every nerve ending screaming back to life, every muscle fiber remembering what movement meant. The pod. He was still in the cryogenic pod. But something was wrong. The wake sequence should have been gradual, controlled, gentle. This felt like being dragged from the bottom of an ocean. "Emergency, revival, complete," a voice said. Not human, not quite machine either. Something in between, speaking English with an accent he couldn't place, an accent that shouldn't exist. The pod lid hissed open. Light flooded in, not the warm yellow of facility lights he remembered, but something blue and cold, like captured moonlight. Marcus tried to sit up. His body refused. How long had it been? The mission parameters were clear. 1,000 years in suspension, while Earth healed from the climate wars, then wake the colony crew to begin rebuilding. 1,000 years. Surely they haven't... "Where?" His voice came out as a croak, dusty and unused. "Where am I?" "You are in Chamber 7 of the Preservation Complex. You have been asleep for 10,347 years. The words hit him like physical blows. 10,000 years. Not 1,000. 10,000. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. Marcus forced his body to move. Every joint protested, but fear is a powerful motivator. He swung his legs over the side of the pod, feet touching a floor that felt wrong, too smooth, too warm, almost alive under his bare skin. The room around him was vast, not the compact facility chamber he remembered entering. This space stretched upward into shadows, walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at, geometry that shouldn't work, angles that made his eyes water. "The others," he managed. "Where are the other pods?" "You are the last," the voice said, and for the first time Marcus detected something in it. Not emotion exactly, but a kind of weight. The others were awakened according to protocol over the last 9 millennia. You were forgotten. Forgotten? The word echoed in the enormous chamber. Marcus stood on shaking legs, using the pod for support. His mind raced, trying to process the impossible. 9,000 years of people waking up without him. Where had they gone? What had they built? What had become of humanity? "I need to see," he said. "Take me outside. I need to see what's happened." Silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Then, "That is inadvisable." "I don't care about advisable. Open the doors." More silence. Then a sound like breath, though nothing here breathed, and a section of wall began to shimmer and dissolve, not opening, dissolving, like sugar in water. Beyond was light. Marcus walked forward on unsteady legs, through the impossible doorway, and stopped. The world had ended, or perhaps it had been reborn into something he couldn't recognize. Above him stretched a sky the color of deep violets and greens, swirling with patterns that moved like living things. The sun, if that was still the sun, hung lower and larger than it should, tinted amber and old. But it was the city that stole his breath. Towers rose in the distance, but they weren't towers. They were organic, crystalline things that pulsed with inner light, connected by bridges that defied gravity, curving and flowing like frozen water. Nothing was straight. Nothing was familiar. Everything was beautiful and completely, utterly alien. "What happened to Earth?" he whispered. "Earth endures, but Earth is no longer yours." Movement caught his eye. Figures in the streets below, if streets was the right word for the flowing pathways of light that connected the structures. They moved with grace that seemed wrong, proportions that didn't quite match human dimensions, too tall, too fluid, limbs that bent in one too many places. Not human. Whatever walked the earth now, whatever had built these impossible cities and painted the sky in alien colors, it wasn't human. "Where are the people?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. He could feel it settling into his chest like ice reforming. "There are no people," the voice said gently. "There have been no people for 7,000 years. You are the last, Marcus Chen, the last human being in existence, and you were not supposed to wake up at all." They came for him at dawn, if dawn was still the right word for when the amber sun crept over the horizon of this changed world. Marcus had spent the night in the chamber, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion that weighed on him like gravity. His mind kept circling the same impossible fact: last human. The words made no sense together. How could 7 billion people simply vanish? Where had they gone? The beings that arrived were tall, impossibly so, their bodies covered in something between scales and silk that shifted colors with their movements. They had faces, or the suggestion of faces, with too many eyes arranged in patterns that suggested intelligence beyond his comprehension. "Marcus Chen," one spoke, and the voice was the same as the chamber's. Now he understood. These beings could make their voices sound like anything. "We are the collectors. You must come with us." "Where?" He stood his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to run. Where would he run to? "To the Museum of Extinct Things," the tall one said, and something in its tone might have been kindness. "You are the last. You must be preserved." Preserved, like a butterfly pinned behind glass, like a fossil pressed into stone. "I'm not dead," Marcus said. "Not yet," the collector agreed. "But you will be. Your species' biological clock is finite. When you die, humanity dies with you. We must document everything before that happens. Your memories, your stories, your genetic code, everything that made your people what they were." What they were. Past tense. As if he was already a ghost. "I won't go," Marcus said, though he had no plan, no resources, no idea if he could even survive in this new world. "I won't be your exhibit." The collectors looked at each other, a gesture so familiar it hurt. Even these alien things had body language he could recognize. They were discussing him, debating. "You have no choice," the tall one finally said. "This world is not built for you anymore. The air you breathe is maintained by our machines. The water you drink is filtered through our systems. Even the gravity has been adjusted. Earth is no longer Earth as you knew it. You cannot survive here without our assistance." "Then help me," Marcus said. "Don't preserve me. Help me live." Another long pause. Then, "We will show you something. Perhaps it will help you understand." They led him out of the chamber, into the impossible city. Marcus walked among them, dwarfed by their height, conscious of every alien being they passed, stopping to stare. Some took images, devices that floated around him like curious insects, capturing him from every angle. Others simply watched with their multiple eyes, tilting their heads in that almost familiar gesture of curiosity. He was an exhibit already. He just wasn't behind glass yet. The Museum of Extinct Things dominated the city center, a massive spiral structure that seemed to grow directly from the ground, all organic curves and crystalline surfaces. Inside, the air felt different, heavier with age and loss. "This is the hall of the former dominant," the collector said, gesturing with a limb that had too many joints. The hall stretched into shadows, lined with displays. Each contained something that once lived, once ruled, once thought itself permanent. Marcus saw creatures he recognized from ancient textbooks, dinosaurs preserved in stasis fields that made them look like they were simply sleeping, mammoths standing frozen mid-step, dodos looking puzzled as if wondering where everyone had gone. And then he saw them. Humans. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. In display cases of their own, arranged in dioramas that showed different eras of humanity. Ancient ones in animal skins, crouching around holographic fires. Medieval ones in armor, frozen mid-sword swing. Modern ones, from his own time, in business suits and casual wear, captured in the middle of ordinary moments. All dead, all preserved, all past tense. "We saved what we could," the collector said quietly. "When the transition happened, most of your species was lost. These few we preserved to remember. You will be the final display, the last human awakened from the old time, the culmination of your species' story." Marcus stood frozen, staring at the face of a woman in 21st century clothing, forever preserved, reaching for a phone she would never touch. She looked so alive, so temporary. What happened? What was the transition? "Your people called it the Ascension. 7,000 years ago, humanity made a choice. They evolved beyond physical form. They uploaded their consciousness into the quantum field, became beings of pure thought and energy. They transcended, Marcus Chen. They left these bodies behind like butterflies leaving cocoons." All of them? All but those in cryogenic suspension. You and the others. Your pods were designed to shield you from all external signals. You never received the call to transcend. You were left behind. Left behind. While humanity reached for godhood, he'd been frozen in a tube, waiting for a wake-up call that never came on time. "Then they're still here," Marcus said, feeling hope spark in his chest. "My people, they're still alive, just in a different form. Can I join them?" The collector's silence was answer enough. "Your hardware is incompatible," it finally said. "The human brain, in its original biological form, cannot make the transition. Those who ascended had spent centuries preparing, modifying their neural architecture, integrating with quantum processors. You are pure baseline human, unchanged, the last of the original model." "So I'm trapped in a museum of ghosts, waiting to become a ghost myself?" "Not trapped," another collector said, speaking for the first time. This one was smaller, its scales flickering with colors that might have been sympathy. "Sacred, you are the last connection to what once was. Through you we can understand the species that came before us, that paved the way for our own emergence. You are not a prisoner, Marcus Chen. You are a treasure." But treasures, Marcus thought, staring at the frozen faces of his extinct species, are things people lock away in boxes, things people admire but never touch, things that belong to the past. "I need time to process this, time to think." "Of course," the tall collector said, "we have prepared quarters for you, comfortable by your species' standards. You may have as much time as you need." Because time was all he had now. Time and the terrible knowledge that he was a relic, a fossil that could still walk and talk and remember when this world belonged to something other than these beautiful, terrible collectors of extinct things. They led him away from the hall, away from the frozen faces of his people. But he could feel their eyes on his back, those dead display case eyes, watching him walk the same path they had walked, the path to being nothing but memory. The quarters were indeed comfortable, or rather, they were trying to be comfortable in the way a child tries to recreate a parent's smile from photographs. The collectors had studied human habitats clearly. There was a bed, soft and yielding, furniture in roughly the right proportions, even what might have been a window, though the view it showed seemed to shift and change, never quite settling on a single landscape. Marcus sat on the bed and felt nothing. Numbness had settled over him like a blanket. 10,000 years, the last human, a museum piece waiting to be catalogued and displayed. The words circled his mind, but refused to become real. He stood and paced the room, 5 steps one way, 5 steps back. His body still ached from the revival, joints grinding, muscles remembering movement slowly. How long did he have? 50 years? 80? A biological clock ticking down to the moment when humanity would become purely historical, confined to displays and data files? The walls of his quarters were smooth, seamless, no doors he could see, though he'd walked through one to enter. The collector's technology made everything feel temporary, mutable. Walls could become doorways, solid could become permeable. Nothing was fixed, nothing was certain, except his extinction. He was examining the wall, running his hands over its surface, looking for seams or controls, when it happened. A sound, or not a sound, something felt rather than heard, like a vibration in his bones. The air around him seemed to thicken, to slow. His hand, moving across the wall, left trails behind it, after-images that hung in space like echoes made visible. Marcus froze, watching his own movements paint themselves across reality. Time was wrong. The feeling intensified. That bone-deep vibration grew stronger, and the world around him began to move like honey. A particle of dust floating past his face slowed, stopped, hung suspended. The shifting patterns in the window that wasn't a window froze mid-change. Everything had stopped. Everything except Marcus. He moved his hand experimentally. It cut through the frozen air with ease, leaving those strange trails. He took a step, another. The world remained locked, a paused recording, while he moved through it like a ghost through walls. His heart hammered. What was happening? Some side effect of the cryogenic process? A hallucination born from stress and impossible circumstances? He reached the wall where the door had been, touched it. His hand sank through the surface as if it wasn't there, passing through solid matter like it was made of mist. On the other side, he could see the corridor, also frozen, a collector suspended mid-step, its scales locked in a moment of color shift. Marcus pulled his hand back. The moment he stopped concentrating, stopped feeling that strange vibration, the world lurched back into motion. The dust particle resumed its lazy float. The window's view continued its subtle transformation. Everything was normal again. Except nothing was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again. He spent the next hour testing this impossible thing he could apparently do. It came easier each time, that sense of reaching for something inside himself, some frequency his body could tune into. When he did, time slowed to a crawl around him. Not stopped completely, he realized, just slowed so dramatically that seconds stretched into minutes. And only for him, only in his immediate vicinity. The implications crashed over him like waves. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Humans couldn't manipulate time. They couldn't phase through solid matter. They couldn't do whatever this was. Unless... Marcus sat back down on the bed, mind racing. The collector had said the ones who ascended had spent centuries modifying themselves, integrating with quantum technology. But what if the modification had started earlier? What if the cryogenic pods, designed to preserve humans for 1,000 years, had been doing something more? What if his pod, running for 10 times longer than designed, had continued that modification process? What if he wasn't just a preserved human anymore? What if he was something else? Something new? The door wall shimmered and dissolved. A collector entered, the smaller one from the museum, scales flickering with colors Marcus was beginning to associate with curiosity. "Marcus Chen, we must begin the documentation process. Your memories, your knowledge of the old world. Time is precious." Marcus looked at the being, at its multiple eyes, its too many joints, its casual assumption of his cooperation. Something inside him hardened. "No," he said. The collector's scales flickered. Confusion colors, probably. "I do not understand. This is necessary. When you expire, all direct knowledge of humanity expires with you." "I'm not expiring," Marcus said, standing. "Not yet. Not for a long time. And I'm not going to spend whatever time I have locked in comfortable quarters being interviewed for your archives. But I want to see this world," Marcus said, surprised by the strength in his own voice. "All of it. I want to know what happened. I want to find the others, the other cryogenic survivors. You said I was the last to wake up, but what about the others who woke up before me? Where did they go?" The collector's color shifted to something darker. "That is complicated." "Then uncomplicate it." A long silence. Marcus could feel it, that vibration, that frequency humming just beneath his skin. Ready. If the collector tried to stop him, tried to force him, he could activate whatever this ability was. He could walk through walls and locked doors, moving through stopped time like a ghost. But he waited, patient, curious. "The others," the collector finally said, "did not adapt well. Most could not accept the truth of what had happened. They grieved, they raged, they broke. We tried to help them, but your species' psychology is fragile. One by one, they chose to end their lives rather than face a world without other humans." The words hit Marcus like stones. "All of them?" "Most. A few. There are rumors. Some humans who escaped our care, who fled into the wild zones where our sensors cannot penetrate. But these are only stories. No confirmed sightings in centuries." Hope, small and fragile, sparked in Marcus's chest. "Take me to the wild zones." "Impossible. The wild zones are dangerous even for us. For a baseline human." "I'm not baseline. Not anymore. Something happened to me in that pod. Something changed. I can feel it." The collector went very still. Its eyes, all of them, focused on Marcus with sudden intensity. "What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated. Should he reveal this? Show them what he could do? But what choice did he have? If he wanted freedom, wanted to search for others, wanted to be anything other than a display piece, he needed leverage. He reached for that frequency, that bone-deep vibration. The world slowed. Marcus walked past the frozen collector, through the still-dissolving wall, out into the corridor. He could see other collectors now, suspended in their various tasks, beautiful crystalline beings locked mid-gesture, mid-thought. He touched one, felt his hand sink slightly into its surface, not quite phasing through, but close. The air felt thick as amber around everything except him. He walked back into his quarters, released the frequency. Time snapped back. The collector's scales exploded into colors Marcus had never seen before. Shock colors, maybe. Fear colors. Its limbs retracted slightly, a defensive gesture. "Impossible," it breathed. "You cannot. That is, you have quantum coherence, temporal displacement, matter phase shifting. These abilities require centuries of neural integration, quantum processing cores embedded in biological tissue. You are baseline. You are—" "I was baseline," Marcus corrected. "Not anymore. Something happened to me in that pod. Something changed. I can feel it. 10,000 years in a cryogenic pod designed for 1,000. Who knows what happened? Maybe the systems malfunctioned. Maybe they overcorrected, compensated, evolved. Maybe I did what the ascended ones did, but slowly, accidentally, while I slept." The collector backed toward the door. "This changes everything. The archivists must be informed. You are not just the last human. You are the first of something new. A bridge between the old biological humanity and the ascended. This is unprecedented." "Then help me," Marcus said. "Don't lock me away. Don't preserve me. Help me find out what I've become. Help me find the others. If there are more humans in the wild zones, they might have changed too. We might not be extinct at all. We might just be evolving." The collector's colors rippled through a dozen shades, processing, calculating. Finally, they settled on something that might have been determination. "It is a risk," it said, "but you are right. If humanity is not dead, but transforming, then that story deserves to be witnessed, not archived. I will take you to the wild zones. I will help you search." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why would you risk it?" The collector's scales flickered with colors that reminded Marcus of sunset, beautiful and melancholy. "Because I am a collector, and the collection of a living, changing story is infinitely more valuable than the preservation of a dead one." In that moment, looking at this alien being offering to help him, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since waking, something besides fear and grief and loss. He felt possibility. They left at what the collectors called midnight, though the amber sun never fully set anymore, just dimmed to a burnt orange that made everything look like an old photograph. Marcus's collector companion had introduced itself with a name that sounded like wind chimes and breaking glass, utterly unpronounceable with human vocal cords. "Call me Cipher," it had suggested. "Your language has that word, yes, for something that unlocks secrets?" Cipher provided Marcus with supplies, water that tasted like memories of rain, food synthesized to match human nutritional needs, but with textures he didn't recognize. And clothing, adaptive fabric that shifted temperature with his body, protected against environmental hazards he couldn't see. The wild zones, Cypher explained, as they moved through the Crystal City's outskirts, are places where the planet has rejected our influence, where Earth remembers what it was before we came, before the transition. The ecosystems there are aggressive, defensive. They view all intelligent life as threats. Even humans? Marcus asked. Especially humans. The planet remembers who broke it first. They traveled in a vehicle that seemed to be half machine, half living thing, its surfaces warm and breathing. It moved without wheels or hoverjets, flowing across the landscape like water finding its level. The crystalline city gave way to transition zones, areas where the collector's geometric architecture slowly surrendered to something wilder, less controlled. Marcus pressed against the transparent wall, watching the world change. Vegetation appeared, but nothing he recognized. Trees, if they were trees, grew in spirals, their bark covered in patterns that moved and shifted. The sky darkened to deeper violets, and things moved in the shadows between strange plants. Large things. Things with too many legs, or not enough, or appendages that defied category entirely. Earth has had 10,000 years to evolve without human influence, Cypher said, following his gaze. Life is resilient, creative, aggressive in its creativity. What you're seeing is a planet that has diversified beyond any historical precedent. It's beautiful, Marcus whispered, and terrifying, and completely alien. His Earth was gone, replaced by this fever dream of evolution run wild. The vehicle stopped at the edge of what looked like a wall of vegetation so thick it appeared solid, a fortress of plant matter that stretched as far as he could see in either direction. This is the boundary, Cypher said. Beyond this point, our technology becomes unreliable. The wild interferes with our systems in ways we don't fully understand. It's as if the ecosystem itself has developed a kind of distributed intelligence, a defense mechanism against ordered thought. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle. The air here tasted different, rich with decay and growth, the smell of things living and dying in an infinite cycle. His skin prickled with awareness. Every sense felt heightened, sharp. The vibration inside him, that strange frequency, hummed louder here, as if responding to something in the environment. "Can you feel it?" he asked Cypher. "Feel what?" "The wild. It's—" Marcus struggled for words. "It's singing. Everything here is connected, communicating. It's like the whole forest is one organism." Cypher's collars rippled with fascination. "We theorized something similar, but could never confirm it. Our senses are tuned for technological systems, quantum coherence. The biological is difficult for us to perceive, but you can feel it?" "Yes." Marcus moved closer to the wall of vegetation. Vines as thick as his torso wove between trees with bark like scaled skin. Flowers bloomed and closed in rhythms that seemed almost like breathing. He knew where he was. The wild knew him, knew what he was. Not alien, not collector, not the ascended who had abandoned their bodies. He was human, old human, original human, the species that first touched this soil, that first named its creatures, that first loved and feared and nearly destroyed it. The wild remembered. The vegetation shifted, parting like a curtain. A path opened, dark and winding, leading deeper into shadows where things moved and watched with eyes that caught stray light. "It's letting us in," Marcus said, amazed. "It's showing us the way." "Or leading us to a trap," Cypher said, but its colors showed excitement rather than fear. "This is unprecedented. In 5,000 years of observation, the wild has never opened for anyone. It kills all who enter. But for you?" "For me, it remembers," Marcus finished. "I'm what it's been waiting for, a human, the first one to come back in 7,000 years." They entered the path, Marcus in front, Cypher following. The moment they crossed the threshold, the wall of vegetation closed behind them. Not threatening, Marcus sensed, but protecting, hiding them from whatever surveillance systems the collectors had watching the boundary. The wild had chosen a side, and it wasn't the side of the new world. They walked for what felt like hours, though time and the wild felt mutable, unreliable. The path twisted through impossible ecology, trees that seemed to grow both up and down simultaneously, flowers that emitted sounds instead of scents, creatures that might have been animals or might have been animate plants, impossible to categorize. And everywhere, that singing, that sense of vast awareness, curious and ancient, examining Marcus with senses he couldn't name. "There," Cypher said suddenly, pointing with a limb. Through the trees ahead, Marcus saw it, a structure, not natural, not grown, built, crudely constructed from salvaged materials and living wood woven together, but unmistakably artificial, unmistakably human. Someone lived here. Marcus's heart hammered as they approached. The structure was small, more shelter than building, but it had been maintained, cared for. Signs of habitation were everywhere. A cleared space for a fire, though the fire was cold. Tools hanging from hooks. A crude door made from woven vines. "Hello?" Marcus called, his voice feeling strange after so much silence. "Is anyone here? I'm human. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm looking for others. Please, if you're here, I'm not a threat. I'm like you." Silence answered, but not empty silence. Marcus could feel it. Someone was nearby, watching. The wild singing had changed tone, become cautious, protective. Then movement, quick and fluid from the shadows to his left. A figure emerged, and Marcus's breath caught. Human, definitely human. A woman, probably in her 30s, though something about her made age difficult to judge. She wore clothing made from what looked like living plant matter, adaptive and camouflaging. Her hair was long, dark, woven with small flowers that seemed to be growing from the strands themselves. But it was her eyes that made Marcus stare. They were green, not the normal green of human eyes, but the green of deep forests, of chlorophyll, of life itself. And they glowed very faintly with their own internal light. "You're real," she said, her voice rough from disuse. "Another one. I thought I was the only one left." "So did I, until today." The woman studied Marcus, and Marcus felt that strange vibration inside him respond to something similar in her. She had it too. Whatever had changed in him during those 10,000 years, she had it as well. Maybe all the late-waking humans had it. Maybe they had all become something new. "My name was Sarah. Sarah Okonkwo. I woke up 600 years ago. They tried to make me a museum piece, too. I ran instead." She smiled, and her teeth had the faint green tint of her eyes. "The wild took me in, taught me, changed me. I'm not entirely human anymore. Are you?" Marcus shook his head slowly. No, I don't think I am. Not entirely. Good, Sarah said, and her smile widened, because entirely human couldn't survive what comes next. The collectors think we're extinct. The ascended abandoned us, but we're not gone. We're not finished. We're just becoming something new. She gestured deeper into the wild, where shadows moved, and the singing grew louder. Come with me, she said. There are others, not many, but enough. Enough to start over. Enough to show this new world that humanity isn't a museum piece. We're still here. We're still evolving. And we're done being collected. Marcus looked back at Cypher, who had been silent throughout the exchange. The collector's colors were impossible to read. Shock, perhaps, or wonder, or fear. You knew, Marcus said, didn't you? You collectors, you knew there were others in the wild. You knew we weren't as extinct as you claimed. We suspected, but we could never confirm. And perhaps we didn't want to. A living humanity, changing and evolving, is much more dangerous than an extinct one. Easier to preserve the dead than deal with the living. And now, Marcus asked, will you tell them, the other collectors, the archivists? The collector's colors rippled, settling finally on something that might have been determination. No, I am a collector, yes, but I collect stories, and this story, your story, is not finished. I want to see how it ends, or rather, how it continues. Sarah stepped forward, offering her hand to Marcus, the plant cloth of her sleeve pulled back, revealing skin that bore patterns like wood grain, like living tattoos that moved beneath the surface. Welcome to the wild, she said. Welcome to the next chapter. Welcome home. Marcus took her hand, felt something pass between them, recognition, connection, possibility. Behind him the wild singing crescendoed, joyful and fierce. Ahead, shadows stirred with others like him, changed and changing, human and more than human. He had woken expecting to find an ending. Instead, he had found a beginning.
Sarah led them deeper into the wild, following paths that only became visible as they approached them, the forest itself revealing the way forward, vine by vine, shadow by shadow. Marcus could feel the ecosystem's awareness like a physical presence, curious and protective, shepherding them towards something important. Cypher followed in silence, its scales dimmed to near invisibility, trying to minimize its presence. Smart, Marcus thought. The collector understood they were guests here, tolerated, but not entirely trusted. How many? Marcus asked as they walked. How many survivors? 23 that I know of, scattered across different wild zones. We don't gather in large groups, too risky, too visible, but we communicate. The wild helps us. It carries messages through root systems and pollen, and things I don't fully understand. We're building a network, slowly, carefully. All changed like us? All changed, yes, but differently. The pods affected each of us based on how long we stayed under, what malfunctions occurred, what the systems tried to compensate for. Some can phase through matter like you. Others can communicate with the wild directly, hear its thoughts. One woman can manipulate biological growth, make plants grow or wither with a touch. We're each becoming something unique. The path opened into a clearing where the amber sun's fading light couldn't quite reach. Bioluminescent fungi carpeted the ground, painting everything in soft blues and greens. And in the center of the clearing, a structure, but nothing like the crude shelter they'd left behind. This was architecture, real and intentional, grown rather than built. Trees had been shaped into living walls, their branches woven tight enough to form solid barriers. Vines created intricate windows that opened and closed like irises. Flowers bloomed in patterns that served as both decoration and light source. The entire building was alive, breathing, part of the forest, yet separate from it. We call it haven. The first one took me decades to grow. Now the wild helps us make them faster. Safe spaces where we can be human without fear of collection. Figures emerged from Haven's living doorways. Humans, all of them, but changed. Marcus saw a man whose skin had taken on a faint metallic sheen, catching light like polished bronze. A young woman whose hair moved like it was underwater, defying gravity. An older man whose eyes were completely black, like windows into deep space. They gathered around Marcus and Cypher, studying them with gazes that felt more than human. Marcus realized they were sensing him the same way he could sense the wild, reading vibrations, frequencies, the subtle energies that made him what he had become. "Another late waker," the bronze-skinned man said. His voice resonated as if speaking through metal. "How long?" 10,000 years, Marcus said, the longest anyone stayed under. Murmurs rippled through the group, awed, interested, maybe envious. "And you brought a collector," the black-eyed man said, his tone flat, unreadable. "Cypher helped me escape, helped me find you. I trust him." "It," Sarah corrected gently. "The collectors don't have gender as we understand it, and trust is complicated. No collector has ever seen Haven before, never been welcomed into the wild. This is unprecedented." Cypher's scales flickered. Nervousness, perhaps? "I mean no harm. I simply wish to witness, to understand. Your transformation is the most significant event in biological history since the Ascension itself." The Ascension, the bronze man spat the word like a curse. "When humanity abandoned everything that made them human, when they left us behind like broken toys." "They didn't know," Marcus said quietly. "The cryogenic pods shielded us from the signal. They couldn't have known we'd be left behind." "Couldn't they?" The black-eyed man stepped forward. "I'm David. I woke 4,000 years ago. I've had a long time to think about what happened. The Ascension wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And those who made that choice knew there were people in stasis. They chose to leave them anyway. They chose transcendence over waiting for us." The words hurt because they might be true. Marcus thought of those frozen faces in the museum, humans who had woken to find themselves obsolete, abandoned. How many had stood where he stood now, processing the same betrayal? "We can't change the past," Sarah said, her voice carrying authority that silenced the murmurs. "But we can shape what comes next. Marcus, you said you were under for 10,000 years. That's longer than anyone. What can you do? What did the pod make you?" Marcus hesitated, then reached for that frequency inside him. The world slowed. Not as dramatically as before. He was learning to control it, to modulate the effect. Everything moved through honey-thick time while he stepped forward, touched David's shoulder, walked around the circle of changed humans, then released the effect. Time snapped back. Gasps erupted from the group. "Temporal displacement," Sarah breathed. "You can move outside of time's flow. Do you understand what that means? You could walk through any barrier, escape any cage, strike before anyone knew you were moving." "I can phase through solid matter too, and I can feel the wild's consciousness, hear its thoughts." "3 major abilities," the woman with floating hair said, her voice dreamy. "Most of us only developed 1 or 2. 10,000 years in the pod must have pushed your evolution further than any of ours." "Which makes you valuable," David said, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "And dangerous, to us and to the collectors. If they knew what you could do—" "They know," Cypher interjected. "I witnessed his abilities before we came here, and I have not reported it to the archivists. Yet," David said.
"Ever," Cypher replied, its colors shifting to something that might have been offense. "I told Marcus Chen I am here to witness a living story, not to betray it. Your species may consider me alien, but I have ethics. I have honor. Honor that serves your collection, David countered. Everything you do is about gathering data, preserving information. We're just specimens to you, no matter how much you pretend otherwise. That's not fair, Marcus said. Cypher risked everything to bring me here. Could have turned me over to the archivists, made me a display piece. Instead, it wants to see what we'll do, David interrupted. Don't you see? We're still being studied, still being collected, just in a different way. It's not on our side, Marcus. It's on the side of whatever makes the best story. Silence fell across the clearing. Marcus looked at Cypher, whose scales had gone completely neutral, revealing nothing. Was David right? Was this all just observation to the collector? A better narrative than a dead human in a museum case? It doesn't matter, Sarah said finally. Cypher is here. It knows about Haven. We can't change that. But we can choose what happens next. She turned to Marcus. You came looking for others. You found us. Now what? What do you want? What did he want? Marcus had woken expecting death, extinction, an ending. He'd found evolution instead. Transformation. Possibility. But possibility toward what? To hide in the wild forever? 23 changed humans surviving on the margins of a world that had moved on without them? I want answers, Marcus said, about what happened to us, about why the pods changed us instead of just preserving us, about whether this was an accident or something else. The CRYOGEN facilities, the original complexes where the pods were manufactured, some still exist, abandoned but intact. If there are answers about what happened to us, they'd be there. The nearest facility is 300 kilometers from here, through territory the collectors monitor heavily. It would be dangerous. I'll go, Marcus said immediately. Not alone. Sarah's green eyes met his. If you're going to find answers, you should have backup. I'll come with you. And, she glanced at Cypher. Its collector friend. Its technology might help us access systems we couldn't otherwise. You trust it? David asked. I trust that it wants to see how this story ends, and that means keeping us alive long enough to finish it. That's alignment enough for now. Marcus felt something shift in the group, a collective decision being made, paths diverging. Some would stay in Haven, safe in the wild's embrace, but others, like Sarah, like him, needed more than survival. They needed truth. We leave at dawn, Sarah said. The wild can hide us for the first 100 kilometers, but after that, we'll be exposed. Marcus, you'll need to practice your abilities. Fine-tune them. 300 kilometers of hostile territory means you'll need to phase us through barriers, slow time to avoid patrols. Can you do that? Marcus thought about the vibration inside him, that frequency he was only beginning to understand. Could he extend it to others? Share his abilities? He had no idea, but he would learn. He had to. I can do it. Then rest tonight, Sarah said. Tomorrow we find out what we were really meant to become. As the group dispersed, returning to Haven's living chambers, Marcus found himself standing alone with Cypher in the clearing's blue-green glow. David was right, wasn't he? You still collecting us, just in a different way. Cypher's colors rippled through shades Marcus couldn't name. Finally, it spoke. When I was young, if young is the right word for beings like me, I wanted to collect dead things, fossils, artifacts, safe, unchanging things. But the greatest collectors in our history didn't collect objects. They collected moments, transformations, stories still being written. Are we a story? You are the story, the bridge between what was and what will be. Humanity didn't end with the ascension, Marcus Chen. It splintered. One branch chose transcendence and became pure consciousness. But the other branch, your branch, chose something different, chose flesh and bone and the wild song, chose to evolve within matter rather than beyond it. We didn't choose anything. We were accidents, leftovers. Were you? Or were you seeds, planted deliberately, waiting for the right conditions to sprout? The cryogen facilities weren't just preservation chambers, they were incubators, and what they were incubating might have been planned all along. The words sent chills through Marcus. You think the Ascension knew? You think they left us behind on purpose? I think tomorrow you will find answers, and I think those answers will change everything, for you, for the collectors, for this entire world. Will you still help us when you know the truth? Cypher's colors settled into something warm, almost affectionate. I am a collector, Marcus Chen, and the truth is always worth collecting, no matter what it costs. In the distance, Haven's bioluminescent walls pulsed softly, breathing with the forest's rhythm. Inside, changed humans prepared for a journey into their own past, seeking answers about their transformation. Marcus stood in the clearing and felt the wild singing around him, felt the strange frequency humming in his bones, felt the weight of 10,000 years pressing against his consciousness. Tomorrow they would learn what the cryogen facilities had really done to them. Tonight, he would practice becoming something more than human, something less than God, something entirely new.
They left Haven before the amber sun fully rose, moving through the wild in a silence that felt almost sacred. Sarah led, her plant-woven clothing shifting colors to match their surroundings, making her nearly invisible. Marcus followed, still learning to trust his changed senses, the way he could feel approaching danger as vibrations in the air, read the wild's moods through subtle shifts in its song. Cypher brought up the rear, its scales dimmed to near transparency, only occasionally flickering with colors that might have been anxiety or excitement. The wild protected them for the first 100 kilometers, just as Sarah had promised. Trees bent to obscure them from above. Undergrowth parted for their passage, then closed behind them, erasing their trail. Twice they heard collector scout vessels passing overhead, sleek, organic ships that pulsed with their own light. But the forest's canopy thickened each time, hiding them beneath layers of living camouflage. "The wild knows what we're doing," Sarah said during a brief rest. "It approves, or at least it's curious. The ecosystem wants to understand what made us, just like we do." Marcus drank from his water supply, watching the way the forest around them breathed and shifted, aware and alive. Can it come with us, beyond its boundaries? No. The wild's consciousness is distributed across millions of organisms. It can't exist in areas the collectors have sterilized. We'll be on our own once we leave its protection. How much further? 50 kilometers to the boundary, then another 200 through what the collectors call the ordered lands. Sterile, controlled, monitored. Sarah's green eyes met his. That's where you'll need to use your abilities, your temporal displacement, your phasing. Can you extend them to us? Marcus had been practicing throughout the journey and had discovered that yes, he could share the effect, but it cost him. Extending his time slowing to include Sarah and Cypher drained something inside him, left him exhausted and shaking. He could manage maybe 5 minutes at a stretch before needing recovery time. I can do it, but not indefinitely. We'll need to move fast and smart. Cypher, who had been examining some bioluminescent fungus with fascination, turned its attention to them.
I can help with that. I still have access to collector networks. I can create false readings, make surveillance systems look away from specific coordinates. But it's risky. If the archivists notice anomalies in the monitoring grid, they'll know someone's helping us from inside. Marcus finished. You'd be exiled, or worse. Yes, but this story is worth that risk. Cypher's colors rippled with something that might have been determination or might have been fear. Besides, I've already committed treason by not reporting your existence. I'm past the point of careful choices. They reached the wild's boundary as the sun climbed toward its zenith. The transition was stark, brutal, living forest giving way to empty gray plains where nothing grew. The collectors had sterilized this buffer zone centuries ago, ensuring the wild's aggressive growth couldn't spread toward their cities. Marcus stood at the edge, one foot still on living soil, the other hovering over dead gray earth. The wild song cut off abruptly at the boundary, replaced by silence so complete it felt like pressure against his ears. I hate this part, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped fully into the sterile zone and immediately seemed diminished, her plant-woven clothing losing its adaptive shimmer, her green eyes dimming slightly. The wild's been part of me for so long. Without its presence, I feel hollow. Marcus joined her and understood. The absence of the wild's consciousness left a gap inside him he didn't know was there. He'd only been connected to it for days, but it had become a comfort, a presence that made him feel less alone. Now, crossing into the dead zone, loneliness crashed over him like a wave. Stay close, Cypher said, moving ahead. The monitoring systems begin 50 meters from the boundary. I'm creating a null space in the surveillance grid, but it's small. We need to stay together. They moved across the sterile plains, three impossible figures in a landscape designed for emptiness. In the distance, Marcus could see collector architecture rising like crystalline growths, the edges of civilization where the new rulers of Earth maintained their ordered, perfect world. Hours passed, the sun arced overhead, amber light making the gray Earth look like ashes. Marcus's legs ached, his body still not fully recovered from 10,000 years of suspended animation. But he pushed on, driven by need, the need to know, to understand, to find meaning in what had happened to him. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward a horizon of violet clouds, they saw it. The cryogenic facility. It rose from the plains like a tomb, a massive structure of old-world concrete and steel, covered in the geometric patterns of technologies that predated the ascension. Solar panels lay shattered on its roof. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. But the building stood, defiant and decaying, a monument to the world that had been. There, Sarah breathed. That's where it all started, where they put us to sleep thinking they were saving us. I felt my heart hammering. Inside that building were answers about the pods, about what had changed them, about whether any of this had been intentional. 10,000 years of questions might finally have responses. They approached cautiously. The facility's entrance hung open, its security systems long dead. Inside, darkness waited, but not complete darkness. Emergency lighting still functioned, casting everything in a sickly red that made shadows seem to move and breathe. The power core must still be active, Cypher observed. Impressive. These human facilities were built to last. Built to last for 1,000 years, Marcus thought, not 10,000 years. Everything here was past its expiration date, running on backup systems that should have failed millennia ago. Yet something had kept it functioning. Something had maintained enough power to keep the pods running, keep him and the others frozen long past their intended wake times. They moved through corridors lined with empty pods, glass chambers that had once held humanity's hope for the future. Dust covered everything. In the red light, dried streaks on the walls looked disturbingly like blood. Probably just rust or leaked fluids from failed systems, but unsettling nonetheless. Sarah stopped at one pod, placing her hand on its glass. This one still has a placard. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, age 34, planetary ecologist. She looked at Marcus. She might have woken up 4,000 years ago, walked through these same halls, found everyone else already gone. Or she might have never woken up at all, Marcus said quietly. How many pods failed completely? How many people just died in their sleep, waiting for a future that never came? They found the control center in the facility's heart, a vast room filled with computer banks, monitoring stations, holographic displays that flickered with corrupted data. At the center of the room stood a column of crystalline material that pulsed with faint blue light, clearly not original to the facility's design. "That's collector technology," Cypher said, its scales brightening with surprise. "But ancient, predating our current civilization by thousands of years. It shouldn't be here. These facilities were built by humans, before the Ascension, before we arrived on Earth." "Then how?" Marcus started, but Sarah cut him off. "Look at the inscription." Carved at the base of the crystal column in multiple languages, including English, were words that made Marcus's blood run cold. "For those who remain, for those who choose, the seeds are planted, the harvest will come. Wait and become."
"The Ascended," Sarah whispered. "They did this. Before they transcended, they modified the facilities. That's why the pods kept running past their limits. That's why we changed. They planned it, all of it." Marcus moved closer to the column, felt it humming with energy that resonated with the frequency inside him. But why? If they were ascending beyond physical form, why engineer a separate evolution for those left behind? "Insurance," Cypher said quietly. "Or perhaps an experiment. What if the Ascended weren't certain their transcendence would succeed? What if they wanted a backup plan? Humans who evolved differently, who stayed physical but gained abilities beyond normal biological limits?" Marcus placed his hand on the column, and the moment he made contact, it flared with light. The entire control center activated, computers blazing to life, holographic displays stabilizing, and suddenly the room was filled with data streams and recorded messages. A hologram formed in front of them, flickering but recognizable. A woman in her 50s wearing the insignia of the old Earth government. Dr. Elena Vasquez, according to the name badge on her projected uniform. "If you're seeing this, then you are one of the changed, one of the late wakers, and you have found your way back to your origin." The hologram gestured, and more data filled the air around them, genetic sequences, neurological scans, timelines showing pod malfunction rate carefully calculated and induced. "The ascension was not unanimous," Dr. Vasquez continued. "Many of us believed transcendence was a mistake, an abandonment of everything that made us human, but we were outvoted, overruled. The majority chose to leave flesh behind, to become pure consciousness in the quantum field. So we planned an alternative." Marcus felt Sarah's hand find his, squeezing tight as they listened. "We modified the cryogenic pods, set them to fail in sequence over thousands of years, each failure carefully engineered to expose the occupant to quantum field integration while maintaining biological form. We created you, Homo transcendus, not post-human like the Ascended, but transhuman, bridges between flesh and energy, between biology and quantum consciousness. You are what we wished we could have been, evolved but still embodied, enhanced but still human." The hologram's expression turned sad. "I'm sorry we left you alone for so long. Sorry you woke to a world that had moved on without you. But understand, you are not accidents. You are not leftovers.
You are the next chapter. The proof that humanity could have evolved without abandoning what made us human in the first place. We seeded these facilities across the planet, placed collector technology here to protect them, to ensure they'd last until you woke. The collectors don't know. They think these installations are purely archaeological sites, but they've been guarding humanity's future without realizing it. Dr. Vasquez smiled, an expression full of hope and desperate faith. If you're watching this, you've survived. You've found others. You've begun to discover what you are. Now comes the choice we never got to make. What will you do with these abilities? Will you hide in the shadows of a world that doesn't want you? Or will you claim your place, show the collectors and the planet itself that humanity is not extinct, merely transformed? The hologram began to flicker, destabilizing. The data here will tell you everything. How to find other facilities, how many sleepers remain, how to fully activate your potential. You are 23 now, but there are 147 still sleeping, waiting for their time to wake. Find them. Wake them up. Build what we couldn't, a humanity that evolves without forgetting what it means to be human. The hologram dissolved into static, then darkness. The control center's lights dimmed back to emergency red. Silence filled the space. Marcus, Sarah, and Cypher stood frozen, processing revelations that rewrote everything they thought they knew. 147? Sarah finally whispered. There are more of us. So many more. And they knew, Marcus said, anger building in his chest. The ones who ascended, they knew some of us would be left behind. They engineered it, made us into an experiment. Or a gift, Cypher said quietly. Your Dr. Vasquez seemed to believe she was giving you a choice humanity never had. The choice to evolve while staying embodied, to keep your connection to physical reality while gaining abilities that rivaled the ascended. Marcus wanted to rage, to reject it all, to curse the ascended for playing God with the lives of those left behind. But he couldn't deny the truth. Whatever they'd done, whatever manipulation they had engineered, it had worked. He was more than human now. They all were. And 147 others were still waiting to join them. The data, Sarah said, moving to the computer banks. She said there's data here, locations of other facilities, information about the remaining sleepers. She began interfacing with the systems, her enhanced abilities letting her navigate technology that should have been incomprehensible. Marcus watched information stream across displays, maps showing dozens of facility locations, genetic profiles of sleepers still in their pods, calculated wake times spanning the next 1,000 years. They're everywhere, Sarah breathed, hidden in wild zones, buried under collector cities, some even in orbit. The Ascended scattered us across the planet and beyond, ensuring humanity would resurface no matter what happened to Earth. This changes everything, Marcus said. We're not survivors of an accident. We're legacy, the Ascended's last gift to the world they abandoned. Or a hedge bet, Cypher observed. In case transcendence failed, in case the Ascended lost themselves in the quantum field, you would remain, physical, embodied, still connected to matter and time, a backup copy of humanity, upgraded and ready to inherit Earth if needed. Then we need to find them, Marcus said with sudden conviction. All of them. Wake them up. Bring them together. Show the collectors and this new Earth that we're not museum pieces. We're the future they didn't know was coming. Sarah looked up from the displays, her green eyes blazing with hope and determination. The nearest facility with active sleepers is only 50 kilometers from here. 3 pods calculated to wake within the next decade, but we could trigger early revival. Bring them out now. Then we do it, Marcus said. We find them, wake them, and we build what Dr. Vasquez dreamed of, a new humanity, not hiding in the wild, but claiming our place in this transformed world. Sarah downloaded the data onto a crystalline storage device, technology that would interface with both human and collector systems. We have what we need: locations, protocols, genetic keys to wake the others safely. Now we need to get back to Haven, share this with the others, and decide how we're going to proceed. Marcus took one last look at the control center, at the column of ancient collector technology that had protected humanity's secret evolution for 10,000 years. Dr. Vasquez's words echoed in his mind. You are not accidents. You are the next chapter. Let's go, he said. We have 147 sleeping humans to wake up, and a world to show them they're not extinct, just transformed. They left the facility as the amber sun touched the horizon, painting the sterile plains in colors of fire and gold. Behind them, the building stood silent once more, its secrets revealed, its purpose fulfilled. Ahead lay the wild's boundary, and beyond that, Haven and their small community of changed humans waiting to learn they weren't as alone as they thought they were. Marcus felt the frequency inside him humming with new purpose. They weren't fossils. They weren't relics. They were seeds, planted deliberately, given time to grow into something the old humanity could only dream of becoming. And now, finally, it was time to bloom.
The journey back to Haven took 2 days. Marcus could feel the weight of the crystal data storage pressing against his chest, tucked safely in an inner pocket. Inside that small device lived the locations of 147 sleeping humans, waiting to be awakened into a world that had forgotten them. 147 seeds, ready to sprout. The wild welcomed them back like returning children, the forest's consciousness washing over Marcus with something that felt remarkably like joy. Trees bent to create shelter when they needed rest. Streams altered their courses to bring fresh water within reach. The ecosystem itself celebrated their return, seemed to understand the significance of what they'd discovered. It knows, Sarah said, during their final rest before reaching Haven. She sat with her back against a tree whose bark had softened to accommodate her, flowers blooming in her hair where they touched the wood. Her connection to the wild had deepened during their absence. Marcus could see it in the way plants leaned toward her, in the green luminescence that now never quite left her eyes. It understands what we found, what we're planning. It wants to help. Cypher had been unusually quiet since leaving the facility, its scales cycling through colors Marcus had learned to associate with deep thought. Now it spoke, voice carrying undertones of something that might have been concern. When you wake the others, everything changes. Right now, you are anomalies, interesting but manageable. 23 changed humans hiding in the wild zones can be ignored, dismissed as irrelevant to the collector's ordered civilization. But 170 transformed humans with abilities that rival the ascended, that becomes a threat. The archivists will notice. They will respond. Let them, Marcus said, surprised by the steel in his own voice. We've been hiding, surviving on the margins, pretending we're extinct. Dr. Vasquez didn't engineer us to hide. She gave us these abilities so we could reclaim what was stolen from us, our world, our future, our right to exist. Reclaim? Cypher asked, its colors flickering with alarm. You speak of conflict, of challenging the collector's sovereignty over Earth. Marcus Chen, we have ruled this planet for 7,000 years. Our civilization spans continents. Our technology reshapes reality itself. You are 23 individuals with barely understood abilities. What do you imagine you can accomplish? Sarah stood, and as she did, Every plant in their immediate vicinity turned toward her, following her movement like sunflowers tracking light. We're not 23 anymore. We're going to be 170, and we're not looking for conflict, Cypher. We're looking for acknowledgement. We want the collectors to recognize that humanity didn't end, it evolved. We deserve a place in this new world, not as museum pieces, not as curiosities, but as equals. Equals, Cypher repeated, and its colors went dark, neutral. I am one collector. I cannot speak for my entire species, but I can tell you this. The archivists do not share power. They document, preserve, and control. The concept of equals is foreign to them. Then they'll have to learn, Marcus said, because we're not asking permission anymore. They reached Haven as the amber sun reached its zenith, light filtering through the wild's canopy in shafts of gold and green. The living structure had grown in their absence, new chambers budding from the main building, the forest's gift to house the influx of changed humans that would soon arrive. The others were waiting, all 23 of them gathered in Haven's central chamber, which had opened to the sky to accommodate the crowd. David stood at the front, his black eyes fixing on Marcus with intensity that made the air feel heavy. "You found something," he said. Not a question, a statement. Marcus pulled out the crystal storage device and held it up for all to see. "We found everything. The truth about what happened to us, the locations of 147 others still sleeping, and a choice. The choice Dr. Elena Vasquez and the other dissidents made for us before the ascension." He told them everything. About the modified cryogenic pods, the deliberate engineering of their transformation, the Ascended's final gift to a humanity that chose to evolve differently. Silence filled the chamber when he finished, the kind of silence that comes before storms, before earthquakes, before everything changes. Finally, the woman with floating hair spoke. Her name was Kenji, Marcus had learned. "They made us into weapons." "They made us into bridges," Sarah corrected, "between what humanity was and what it could become, between flesh and energy, biology and quantum consciousness. We're not weapons, Kenji, we're possibilities. Possibilities they engineered without our consent," David said, his voice cold. "We were test subjects, experiments left to develop in isolation while the rest of humanity ascended to something greater. And now you want us to wake up more of these, what did you call us, seeds? More seeds to plant in someone else's garden?" "It's not someone else's garden," Marcus said. "It's Earth, our home. And yes, we were engineered. Yes, we didn't consent to this transformation. But neither did we consent to being abandoned, to waking up in a world that had moved on without us. We can be angry about that. We should be angry. But we can also be something more. We can be what the Ascended couldn't be, human and enhanced, flesh and transcendent, grounded yet reaching for the stars." He stepped forward, meeting David's black-eyed gaze. "I want to stop being a ghost in a world that thinks we're extinct. I want to wake up our people and build something, not a civilization that rivals the collectors, but a community that proves humanity's story didn't end. It just took a different path." David held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly, something shifted in those endless black eyes. Not acceptance, not quite, but consideration. Possibility. "How many can we wake?" he asked.
Marcus felt his heart skip. That was a yes. Conditional, cautious, but a yes nonetheless. "The nearest facility is 50 kilometers from here," Sarah said, pulling up holographic displays from the data crystal. 3 pods, all calculated to wake within the next decade. We could trigger early revival, bring them out safely within days. After that,
She gestured at the constellation of locations lighting up the chamber. Dozens of facilities, scattered across continents, some close to collector cities, some buried in remote wild zones. We'd need to be strategic, careful. Start with the accessible ones, build our numbers, then attempt the more dangerous retrievals. And the collectors? Kenji asked. When do they notice? When do they try to stop us? They already know something's happening, Cypher said quietly. All eyes turned to the collector, who had been so still Marcus had almost forgotten it was there. I have been monitoring archivist communications. They've detected anomalies in the surveillance grid, gaps where there should be coverage, energy signatures that don't match known patterns. They don't know what's causing it yet, but they're investigating. You have weeks, perhaps a month, before they understand what you are and what you're doing. Then we move fast, Marcus said. We wake the closest sleepers first, bring them to Haven, integrate them into our community. Every new person we wake is another voice, another set of abilities, another proof that we're not extinct. When the collectors finally understand what's happening, we'll be too numerous, too diverse, too entrenched in the wild to simply erase. You're betting our survival on the hope that the collectors will accept us rather than eliminate us? David said. I'm betting our survival on the fact that we're worth alive than dead, Marcus countered. Cypher came with us because we're a living story, not a finished one. The collectors are documentarians, archivists, preservationists. They don't destroy, they collect. If we present ourselves as a thriving, evolving species rather than dangerous anomalies, they'll want to observe us, study us, add our story to their collections. And if you're wrong, David pressed. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have proven we were more than fossils waiting to be displayed. At least we'll have given those 147 others a chance to live instead of sleeping through eternity. The chamber filled with murmuring as the changed humans discussed among themselves. Marcus watched emotions play across altered faces, fear and hope, anger and excitement, doubt and determination. These were people who had woken to find themselves alone, obsolete, forgotten. Now they were being offered a chance to be something else, a community, a species reborn, a future instead of just a past. Finally, Sarah raised her hand, and silence fell. Her green eyes swept across the gathered humans, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had survived 600 years alone, who had learned to thrive in a world that wanted her extinct. I vote yes, she said. We wake them, all of them, and we build what the Ascended couldn't, a humanity that evolves without forgetting its roots. Who's with me? Hands rose. Not all of them, not immediately, but one by one the changed humans made their choice. Kenji, the bronze-skinned man, the woman who could manipulate plant growth, others whose names Marcus was still learning, whose abilities he was still discovering. Finally, David raised his hand. The last to agree, but his vote carried weight. We do this smart, we do this careful, and if the collectors come for us, we defend ourselves. Agreed? Agreed, Marcus said, although he hoped it wouldn't come to that. The vote was unanimous. That night they held what Sarah called a remembering, a ceremony the changed humans had developed over centuries of isolation. They sat in circles within Haven's living walls, sharing memories of the world that had been, the old Earth before the climate wars, before the ascension, before everything changed. They spoke of families and cities, of mundane joys and ordinary sorrows, of a humanity that had been flawed and beautiful and completely, wonderfully human. Marcus shared memories of his training for the colony mission, of the hope they'd all felt embarking on their 1,000-year sleep, believing they were saving humanity's future. He spoke of his sister, who had chosen not to go into cryogenic sleep, who had wanted to face the changed world head-on rather than skip past it. He wondered what had become of her. Had she ascended? Or had she simply lived her life and died naturally, the way humans had died for millions of years? When the remembering ended and the changed humans dispersed to their chambers, Marcus found himself standing alone in the central room, looking up at the stars visible through the opened canopy. The constellations were wrong. 10,000 years of precession had shifted everything, made the sky alien even before considering the violet and green auroras that now painted the night sky. "You are having doubts," Cypher said, emerging from the shadows where it had been observing the ceremony. "Not doubts. Fear. There's a difference. I believe we're doing the right thing, but that doesn't mean I'm not terrified of what comes next." "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. Fearless leaders make reckless decisions. You are attempting something unprecedented, rebuilding an extinct species from intentionally engineered seeds. The fact that you're afraid means you might actually succeed." "Why are you really helping us, Cypher? And don't tell me it's just because we're an interesting story. There's more to it than that." Cypher's scales flickered through a dozen colors before settling on something dark and contemplative. "Because I am tired of collecting death. For 5,000 years I have cataloged extinct species, preserved the final moments of civilizations, documented endings. I want just once to witness a beginning, a true resurrection, not just from physical death, but from historical extinction. You are giving me that chance." "We might fail," Marcus warned. "All the best stories involve the possibility of failure. That's what makes them worth collecting." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the strange stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow they would begin the work of waking the sleeping, of bringing humanity back from the edge of extinction, one transformed human at a time. Marcus reached for that frequency inside him, that vibration that let him slip between moments, phase through barriers, exist slightly outside the normal flow of time. It hummed stronger now, as if resonating with purpose. He wasn't just the last human anymore. He was the first of something new, and 147 others were waiting to join him.
The first 3 awakenings went smoothly. Marcus, Sarah, and a small team traveled to the nearby facility under the wild's protection, found the pods exactly where the data crystal indicated, and initiated the revival sequences. The process took hours. Careful, controlled warming of tissues that had been frozen for millennia. Gentle stimulation of nervous systems that had forgotten how to fire. Patient monitoring as 3 more changed humans gasped their way back to consciousness. Their names were James, a physician who had volunteered for the colony mission, hoping to practice medicine on a renewed Earth. Yuki, an engineer who had designed some of the original cryogenic systems. And Maria, a teacher who had simply wanted to see the future, to know if humanity's children would inherit something better than what they'd left behind. All 3 had been asleep for 8,000 years. All 3 woke to discover they'd become something more than human. James, with the ability to sense and manipulate biological processes. Yuki, whose mind could interface directly with any technology she touched. Maria, who could project her consciousness outside her body, experiencing the world from multiple perspectives simultaneously. They adjusted better than Marcus expected. Perhaps because they woke to a community rather than isolation, to others like them rather than alien collectors and museums full of the dead. Perhaps because Sarah's 600 years of experience had taught her how to ease the transition, how to guide new wakers through grief and shock and wonder into acceptance. Within a week, they were integrated into Haven. Within 2, they were helping plan the next awakening mission. That's when the collectors noticed. Marcus was practicing his temporal displacement in a clearing near Haven when Cypher found him, scales blazing with colors he'd never seen before. Panic colors, alarm colors, colors that meant everything had just become complicated. "They know," Cypher said without preamble. "The archivists. They've been analyzing the surveillance anomalies and energy signatures. They've identified Haven's location. They know changed humans are gathering here." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less. A delegation is being assembled. Armed, Marcus. They're bringing containment technology, designed to neutralize quantum abilities. They're treating you as a threat, not a curiosity." "We need to evacuate," Marcus said immediately, reaching for that frequency inside him, preparing to accelerate his time sense and race back to Haven. "Wait," Cypher's voice stopped him. "Evacuation means abandoning Haven, means going back to hiding, to surviving on the margins. Is that what you want? After everything you've discovered, everyone you've awakened?" Marcus paused. No, that wasn't what he wanted. They'd worked too hard, come too far, proven too much to simply scatter back into shadows. "Then what do you suggest?" "Talk to them," Cypher said. "Let me bring the delegation here, but on your terms. Show them what you are, what you've become. Make them understand you're not a threat, you're an evolution, the living continuation of Earth's most fascinating species. Appeal to what collectors value most: knowledge, preservation, story." "And if they don't listen? If they decide to contain us anyway?" Cypher's colors shifted to something that might have been determination or might have been resignation. "Then I stand with you, even if it costs me everything." Marcus studied the collector. In the weeks since they'd met, Cypher had become something Marcus hadn't expected. A friend, an ally, someone who saw changed humans as people rather than specimens, as a story worth protecting rather than just collecting. "All right," Marcus said. "We talk, but we do it our way, on our ground, with all of us present. If the archivists want to understand what we are, they'll have to see all of us. Not just me, not just the ones who fit their expectations, everyone. All 26 of us now." Back at Haven, the news spread like electricity through water. The changed humans gathered in the central chamber, which the wild had expanded overnight as if sensing the coming confrontation. Trees bent to form natural amphitheater seating. Bioluminescent flowers bloomed to provide light that was gentler, less threatening than the harsh brightness the collectors might have expected. Sarah stood beside Marcus as they waited, her green eyes reflecting the biolight. "Are you sure about this? We could still run. The wild would hide us." "I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of hiding. We've spent too long being afraid of extinction. Maybe it's time to remind the universe that humanity doesn't go quietly." The collectors arrived at dusk. Not the peaceful, organic dusk Marcus had first experienced, but a tense, heavy twilight that felt like the pause before thunder. There were 5 of them, led by an enormous collector whose scales were ancient gray, its multiple eyes holding the weight of millennia. This was an archivist, one of the eldest, most influential of the collector's civilization. "I am called Chronicle," he spoke, with the authority of the Archive Council. "You are harboring dangerous anomalies, biological entities with quantum-level abilities that destabilize the ordered systems of our civilization. You must surrender them for proper containment and study." Marcus stepped forward before anyone else could speak. His heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady, calm. "My name is Marcus Chen. I was human. I am still human, though changed. And with respect, Archivist Chronicle, we're not anomalies. We're continuations. We're what humanity became when given 10,000 years to evolve in isolation." "You are accidents," Chronicle said flatly. "Malfunctioning preservation systems that produced unintended mutations. Interesting, certainly. Worth studying, but not worth the threat you pose to organized reality." "We're not accidents," Sarah said, stepping forward to join Marcus. Behind them, the other changed humans rose as one,
a united front of transformed humanity. We were engineered, deliberately designed by the ascended humans before they transcended. We're proof that evolution doesn't require abandoning physical form. We're the path humanity didn't take until now. Chronicle's scales flickered through colors that might have been surprise or might have been skepticism. Explain. So they did. Marcus and Sarah, taking turns, laid out everything they'd discovered in the cryogenic facility. The modified pods, Dr. Vasquez's message, the intentional creation of Homo transcendus as an alternative evolutionary path, the 147 others still sleeping, waiting to be awakened. When they finished, Chronicle stood motionless for so long Marcus wondered if the archivist was still processing or had simply rejected everything as impossible. Finally, if this is true, if you are intentional rather than accidental, it changes the classification. You would not be anomalies, but rather a designed species, a legitimate evolution. But how do I know your claims are accurate? How do I know you're not simply mutants constructing a narrative to justify your existence? I can show you, Marcus said. Not just tell you, show you. I can take you to the facility, let you examine the data yourself, let you verify every claim we've made. We're not asking for blind acceptance, we're offering proof.
Chronicle's eyes, all of them, focused on Marcus with intensity that felt like being examined at a cellular level. You would grant access to your origin point. Allow collector investigation of your creation. In exchange for recognition, Marcus said, not as curiosities or threats, but as a species, as Earth's newest evolution, with the right to exist here alongside the collectors, not as museum pieces, as equals. That word, equals, hung in the air like a challenge. The other collectors in the delegation stirred, scales flickering with colors Marcus couldn't interpret, but Chronicle remained still, contemplative. I cannot grant such recognition on my own authority. This decision affects the fundamental structure of our civilization's relationship with this planet. It would require full Archive Council deliberation. Then bring them, David said, stepping forward from the crowd of changed humans. His black eyes met Chronicle's many ones without flinching. Bring your entire council. Let them see us, all of us. Let them examine our facility. Let them decide if we're worth acknowledging or worth erasing. But know this, we won't go quietly if you choose erasure. We've discovered what we are, what we can do. We'll fight for our right to exist. Tension crackled through the chamber. For a moment, Marcus thought Chronicle would reject everything, would order containment protocols, would force the confrontation they'd all been dreading. Then the archivist's scales shifted to a color Marcus had never seen, something like respect or perhaps recognition of worthy opponents. 3 days, Chronicle said. I will convene the Archive Council. I will bring them here to your haven. I will arrange transport to your origin facility. And in 3 days, the Council will make its determination. You will be recognized as a legitimate species, or you will be contained as threats to order. Prepare yourselves. The delegation departed, leaving only Cypher behind. The smaller collector's scales glowed with colors that definitely meant excitement now. That went better than I expected, Cypher said. Chronicle is conservative but fair. If the data supports your claims, if the Council can verify you're designed rather than accidental, you have a real chance at recognition. And if they don't verify it? Kenji asked. If they decide the threat outweighs the value? Then we demonstrate our value, Marcus said, with more confidence than he felt. We show them what we can do.
We prove that a physical humanity with quantum abilities is worth preserving, worth acknowledging, worth sharing Earth with." Sarah's hand found his. 3 days. We use them to wake more sleepers. Bring our numbers up. When the council arrives, we need to show them we're not just 26 individuals. We're a thriving population, a species in the process of rebirth. Marcus nodded. 3 days to prove they weren't extinct. 3 days to demonstrate that humanity's story hadn't ended with the ascension. It had simply taken a different path. 3 days to save their species for the second time in 10,000 years. That night, teams went out to the nearest facilities. They worked around the clock, waking sleepers faster than before, taking calculated risks to increase their numbers. Each new awakening brought new abilities, new perspectives, new proof that changed humans were diverse, adaptable, and undeniably alive. By the time the Archive Council arrived, their population had swelled to 47. 47 transformed humans, standing together in Haven's expanded chamber, representing humanity's refusal to become extinct. Chronicle had brought 12 other archivists, ancient collectors whose scales bore the patina of millennia, whose eyes held the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that had observed Earth's evolution for 7,000 years. They arranged themselves in a semicircle around the changed humans, creating a visual representation of judgment, the old watching the new, the established evaluating the emergent. "We have examined your facility," Chronicle began, voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We have verified the data. We have confirmed that your transformation was intentional, designed by a faction of ascended humans before their transcendence. Your claims are accurate. You are not accidents. You are engineered evolutions." Relief flooded through Marcus, though he kept it off his face. Verified, confirmed, those words meant everything. "However," Chronicle continued, and Marcus's relief evaporated, "engineering does not automatically confer rights. Many species have been engineered throughout galactic history. Most failed. Many became threats. A few thrived. The question before the Archive Council is not whether you are designed, but whether you are sustainable, whether you pose a threat to Earth's current ecological and civilizational balance, whether acknowledging you as a legitimate species serves preservation or endangers it." "We're not a threat," Marcus said. "We're a solution. For 7,000 years, you've believed humanity was extinct. You've mourned the loss of the species that first developed consciousness on this planet, that first reached for the stars. But we're proof that humanity adapted instead of dying. We evolved to fit the new world rather than resist it. We've integrated with the wild, developed symbiotic relationships with Earth's transformed ecosystems. We represent what the collectors claim to value, preservation through adaptation." One of the other archivists spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones vibrate. "You speak of integration, but you hide in wild zones. You avoid our cities, reject our order. How is this integration? This seems more like segregation, separation, choosing wildness over civilization." "We chose wildness because we weren't welcome in civilization," Sarah replied, her voice steady but carrying an edge. "Every human who woke before the last few weeks either died by suicide or fled to the wild to avoid being preserved in museums. You treated us as relics, not people. The wild welcomed us when your cities would have caged us. Don't mistake our adaptation for rejection. We went where we could survive." "And now," another archivist asked. "What do you want from us, from Earth? You speak of recognition, but recognition implies presence, participation in planetary governance, access to resources, rights to territory. You're asking us to share a world we've managed for 7,000 years with a species that has been present for less than a decade." Marcus glanced at David, who nodded slightly. They'd anticipated this question, had debated long into the night about how to answer it. "We want what any species wants: space to exist, resources to survive, freedom to evolve. We're not asking to overthrow your civilization or claim territory you've developed, but Earth is large. The wild covers vast areas you've deliberately left untouched. Let us live there. Let us build our communities in the spaces between your cities. Let us be neighbors, not museum pieces or threats." "And in exchange," Chronicle pressed, "what do you offer? A species that demands acknowledgement must also offer value." Here was the crucial moment, the pitch they'd prepared, the bargain they hoped to tip the balance. "We offer partnership," Marcus said. "You're historians, documentarians, preservationists, but you're limited by your nature. You think in terms of order, structure, categorization. We think organically. We can interface with the wild in ways you can't, understand Earth's transformed ecosystems from the inside. We can serve as intermediaries between your ordered civilization and the planet's chaotic wilderness. We can help you document and understand systems that have eluded you for millennia." "More than that," Yuki added, stepping forward, "my ability lets me interface with any technology. I can help optimize your systems, identify inefficiencies, bridge gaps between biological and technological processes. Others here can manipulate biological growth, sense danger before it manifests, project consciousness to scout territories too dangerous for physical presence. We're not just asking for space, we're offering abilities that can benefit both our species." The archivists conferred among themselves, colors flickering in patterns too rapid and complex for Marcus to follow. Minutes stretched. The changed humans waited, barely breathing, while their fate was debated in a language of bioluminescence and chemical signals. Finally, Chronicle's colors settled into something neutral, formal, decision colors. "The Archive Council has deliberated. We have reached a determination." Marcus felt Sarah's hand tighten on his. This was it. Recognition or extinction. Acknowledgement or containment. Everything they'd fought for balanced on whatever Chronicle said next. "Humanity, Homo transcendus, is hereby acknowledged as a legitimate species of Earth. You are granted autonomous status within the wild zone territories, with rights to resource access and territorial claims in areas not currently developed by collector civilization. You will be permitted to continue awakening other sleepers, with the condition that each awakening is documented and that you maintain population sustainability within ecological limits." Marcus felt his legs nearly give out. They'd done it. Against every impossible odd, they'd convinced an alien civilization to recognize them as people, as a species, as legitimate inheritors of Earth alongside the planet's new rulers. But Chronicle wasn't finished. "However, this recognition comes with conditions. You will establish formal diplomatic contact with the Archive Council. You will allow periodic observation of your communities for documentation purposes, and you will assist in mediating between collector civilization and the wild when conflicts arise. You are asking to be partners. We expect you to act as partners. Understood?" "Understood," Marcus said, his voice stronger than he felt. "We agree to these terms." "Then welcome," Chronicle said, and its scale shifted to colors that might have been warmth or might have been something close to joy. "Welcome, Homo Transcendus, to the community of Earth's conscious species. May your evolution continue. May your integration prosper. May your story never end." The chamber erupted, changed humans embracing, crying, celebrating. They'd done the impossible. They'd brought humanity back from the historical dead. Cypher approached Marcus, scales blazing with colors that definitely meant excitement now. "I told you," it said. "I told you this story was worth collecting. And now it continues. Now I get to document not an ending, but a beginning. Thank you, Marcus Chen. Thank you for letting me witness this." I smiled, feeling tears on my cheeks I didn't bother to wipe away. "Thank you for helping us write it. We couldn't have done this without you." As the celebration continued around them, Marcus looked up through Haven's open canopy at the violet-green sky, at the amber sun that would never quite set the way it had in his memories. This wasn't the Earth he'd left 10,000 years ago. It never would be. But it was home. And finally, officially, they belonged here. Humanity had survived its extinction. Now came the harder part, learning how to thrive.
6 months after recognition, Marcus stood at the edge of what would become humanity's first above-ground settlement in 7,000 years. They'd chosen a location at the border between the wild and collector territory, symbolically important, Sarah had insisted, a place that represented their nature as bridges between chaos and order, between Earth's untamed ecosystems and conscious civilization. The settlement grew upward and downward simultaneously, architecture that borrowed from both Haven's organic designs and collector crystalline structures. Trees shaped into living buildings stood beside geometric constructs of matter-phase stone that Marcus and others with his abilities had pulled directly from the Earth's substrate. It was beautiful and strange, utterly unlike anything humans had built in the old world, perfectly suited for what they were becoming. Population had swelled to 93. Every week brought new awakenings, new abilities manifesting, new perspectives enriching their growing society. They'd established 3 more settlements in different wild zones, each adapted to local ecosystems, each developing its own character while remaining connected to the others through a network that used both collector technology and the wild's root consciousness communication system. Marcus watched construction crews working, humans with abilities specifically suited to building, shaping matter with thought and touch, coaxing structures from raw materials through quantum manipulation. 6 months ago, these people had been asleep, frozen, waiting. Now they were architects of humanity's future, literally building the world they would inhabit. Impressive, isn't it? Marcus turned to find David approaching, his black eyes reflecting the settlement's lights. David had changed since recognition, softened maybe, or perhaps just allowed himself to hope again. He'd taken responsibility for coordinating with the archivists, his natural skepticism making him perfectly suited for diplomatic work that required constant verification and negotiation. "More than impressive," Marcus said. "It's miraculous. 6 months ago, we were hiding in the wild, barely believing we deserved to exist. Now, we're building cities." "Not cities," David corrected with a slight smile. "Communities. There's a difference. Cities imply the kind of massive scale we'll never reach. We're still less than 100 individuals. But communities, places where people know each other, support each other, build together, that we can do." Movement in the settlement caught Marcus's attention. Sarah emerged from one of the living structures, her form now so integrated with plant matter it was sometimes hard to tell where she ended and the wild began. Flowers bloomed in her wake, Vines shifted to accommodate her passage. She'd become something like a priestess to the wild's consciousness, the primary intermediary between changed humanity and Earth's transformed ecosystems. She waved, and Marcus waved back, feeling warmth that had nothing to do with the amber sunlight. They'd grown close during these months of building and negotiating, and slowly, carefully, proving that humanity deserved its second chance. Not romantically, both of them were too focused on survival for that, but with a deep partnership that felt as fundamental as breathing. There's news from the Antarctic facility. 3 more pods ready for revival. One of them is from the original colony mission, like you, someone who was supposed to wake up 9,000 years ago. Marcus felt a pang of sympathy. Another person who'd missed the ascension, who'd wake to find everything changed. But at least they'd wake to a community, to others who understood, to a world that acknowledged their right to exist. "I'll lead the awakening mission," Marcus said. "Tomorrow, if weather permits." "Actually," David said, "Chronicle requested you specifically for something else. There's a situation." The way David said situation made Marcus's stomach tighten. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where your unique abilities are needed. There's a group of collectors who never accepted the council decision to recognize us. They've been, let's call it protesting, refusing to acknowledge our legitimacy, creating obstacles, and now they've taken it further. They've sealed off a facility we were planning to visit, trapped the pods behind barriers our teams can't penetrate." "Holding the sleepers hostage," Marcus said flatly. "Essentially, Chronicle is furious, but there are limits to the Archive Council's authority. Some collectors genuinely believe we're threats, that recognition was a mistake. They won't move against us directly, that would violate Council decree, but they'll make it difficult for us to access sleepers, hoping we'll stay small, manageable, eventually fade away." Marcus felt anger kindle in his chest. After everything they had accomplished, everything they'd proven, there were still those who wanted humanity to remain extinct. How many sleepers are trapped? 7, all at one facility in what used to be Northern Europe. The dissidents have erected quantum barriers around the entire complex. Nothing can phase through, nothing can penetrate, except someone who can manipulate time itself, someone who can slow their personal timeline enough to slip between the quantum fluctuations in the barrier. Chronicle believes you can do it. So do I. The question is whether you will. Marcus looked out at the settlement, at the humans building their future with their own transformed hands. They'd come so far, risked so much, and now 7 more of their people were being used as pawns in a political dispute between collectors who still couldn't accept that humanity had evolved rather than died. "Of course I will," Marcus said. "Those are our people in there, our family. We don't leave family behind." David's expression softened into something that might have been approval or might have been relief. "I'll tell Chronicle. They'll provide transport to the facility. But Marcus, be careful. The dissidents won't hurt you directly, but they might try other methods to stop you. And if you fail, if you can't penetrate the barrier, it gives them ammunition to argue we're not as capable as we claim, that recognition was premature." "I won't fail," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. The journey to Northern Europe took a day via collector transport, sleek organic vessels that bent space rather than traveling through it, making continents feel like neighborhoods. Marcus traveled with Sarah, Cypher, and 2 other changed humans. James, whose biological manipulation abilities might be needed for the awakenings, and Yuki, whose technological interface could help them navigate the facility's systems once inside. Chronicle accompanied them personally, the massive archivist's presence making it clear this was officially sanctioned, not some rogue operation. The dissidents might make things difficult, but they wouldn't dare act against a direct Archive Council mission.
The facility sat in what had once been Norway, now transformed into landscape Marcus barely recognized. The mountains were taller, sharper, as if Earth's geology had continued evolving in his absence. Snow that fell was faintly luminescent, and the forests covering the lower slopes bore that distinctive bioluminescent quality that marked the wild's territory. But around the facility itself, nothing grew, a perfect sphere of empty space, sterile and dead, marking where the quantum barriers held everything at bay. A group of collectors waited outside the barrier, the dissidents, Marcus assumed. Their scales bore colors he'd learned to associate with rigidity, with refusal to adapt, old patterns holding desperately against inevitable change. The largest among them stepped forward as their transport landed. Archivist Chronicle, you overstep. This facility is under protective custody pending further review of the human question. The human question was answered by council vote. Homo transcendus has been recognized. Your protective custody is unlawful detention. Remove the barriers. We cannot. They are automated, designed to respond only to our genetic signatures. We have locked ourselves out as surely as we've locked the humans in. A safeguard against political pressure. Marcus saw the lie immediately, saw it in the way the dissident's scales flickered, in the subtle shift of its posture. They could remove the barriers, they simply wouldn't. Then we'll enter without your permission, Marcus said, stepping forward. The dissident's multiple eyes focused on him with something that might have been contempt. You cannot. The barriers are quantum locked. They exist in all possible states simultaneously until observed, collapsing only to reject any intrusion. Your phase shifting will not work. You cannot phase through something that is simultaneously solid and permeable, locked and open. The contradiction will shred your quantum coherence. Maybe, Marcus said, but maybe I'm more adapted than you think. Only one way to find out. He approached the barrier, feeling it before he could see it, a pressure in the air, a wrongness that made his enhanced senses scream warnings. The barrier shimmered, barely visible, like heat distortion over summer pavement. But when Marcus extended his hand, he felt resistance, solid, impenetrable. He closed his eyes, reached for that frequency inside him, deeper than before, further than he'd ever pushed. Time slowed around him, the world dropping into that honey-thick flow he'd learned to navigate. But the barrier remained solid. It existed in all timelines simultaneously. The dissident was right about that. But Marcus had learned something during 6 months of building and negotiating and pushing his abilities to their limits. Time wasn't the only thing he could manipulate. Probability was malleable too. Quantum states responded to observation, collapsed based on expectation. What if he expected the barrier to be permeable? Marcus dove deeper into that frequency, into the quantum foam of reality itself. He felt his consciousness spread, exist in multiple states simultaneously, here and not here, solid and permeable, locked and open. He became the contradiction the barrier couldn't resolve. And he stepped through. Pain lanced through him like lightning, every nerve ending screaming as his quantum coherence fractured and reformed, fractured and reformed 12 times per second. He felt himself splitting, becoming multiple Marcus Chens, existing in overlapping timelines, all trying to occupy the same space. Then he was through, stumbling to his knees on the other side, gasping, shaking, but alive. Behind him, I heard Sarah's voice, distant through the barrier. "Marcus, are you okay?" He forced himself to stand, turned to see them watching him through the shimmer. He raised his hand, alive, whole, successful. The dissident scales had gone pale with shock. No one had penetrated a quantum barrier before. It shouldn't have been possible. But humans had always been good at doing impossible things. The facility was dark, emergency lights barely functioning after centuries of isolation. Marcus moved through corridors lined with pods, searching for active ones. 7 sleepers, David had said. 7 people waiting for rescue. He found them in the central chamber, pods still functioning, preservation fields intact, 7 humans suspended in the moment before awakening. Their nameplates read like poetry. Dr. Sarah Kimura, environmental scientist. Marcus Obi, agronomist. Chen Wei, cultural anthropologist. Names from the old world. People who had believed they were saving humanity's future, who had volunteered to sleep through the hard times and wake to help rebuild. They'd slept through more than hard times. They'd slept through the end of everything they knew. But they would wake to something new, something strange and wonderful and utterly unexpected. Marcus initiated the revival sequences, his enhanced abilities letting him interface with systems that should have been incomprehensible. One by one, the pods began their warming cycles, bringing frozen flesh back to life, degree by careful degree. It would take hours. Marcus settled in to wait, watching 7 more humans begin their journey from the old world to the new. Outside, he knew Sarah and the others would be working on the barrier from the other side, trying to find a way through to join him. Cypher would be documenting everything, adding this moment to the ever-growing collection of humanity's resurrection story. Chronicle would be negotiating with the dissidents, making it clear their obstruction had failed, that changed humans were more capable than anyone had anticipated. But inside, in the quiet darkness of the facility, it was just Marcus and 7 sleeping people who didn't yet know how radically their world had transformed. "Welcome back," Marcus whispered to them. "I know you're scared, I know you're confused, but you're not alone. You're never going to be alone again. We're here, we're waiting, we're family." One of the pods cycled further along than the others, Chen Wei, the cultural anthropologist. Her eyes flickered beneath closed lids. Dreams, maybe, or the first stirrings of consciousness returning after millennia of suspension. Marcus moved closer, placed his hand on the pod's surface. "It's okay," he said softly. "Take your time. The world can wait. We've got all the time you need." And they did. That was the miracle of it, the gift the Ascended had given them even as they abandoned physical form. They had time. Time to wake up slowly, time to adjust gradually, time to discover what they'd become and decide what they wanted to be. Time to write the next chapter of humanity's story, one awakening at a time.
Hours later, when Sarah finally managed to phase through using Marcus's technique, bloody-minded determination letting her push her own abilities further than she'd thought possible, she found him sitting beside Chen Wei's pod, watching the woman's vitals stabilize, her brain patterns normalizing, her eyes beginning to open. "You did it," Sarah said, her voice full of pride and relief. "We did it," Marcus corrected, "all of us. This isn't about me, Sarah. It's about what we can accomplish together." Chen Wei's eyes opened fully. Confusion, fear. Then, seeing Marcus and Sarah watching over her, something else. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate human need for connection, for not being alone in the terrifying unknown. "Where?" she managed, voice rusty and uncertain. "Somewhere safe, somewhere strange, somewhere that's going to take a lot of explaining. But first, let me tell you the most important thing. You're not extinct. None of us are. We're just evolving." Over the next week, all 7 sleepers completed their revival. All 7 manifested new abilities. Quantum coherence had gifted them transformations just like it had gifted Marcus and the others. They joined the growing community, adding their skills and perspectives to the grand project of rebuilding humanity in a world that had moved on without them. The dissidents, faced with undeniable proof of Homo transcendensis capabilities, withdrew their opposition. Some even approached Chronicle with requests to study the changed humans, not as specimens, but as equals, as partners in understanding how consciousness could evolve while maintaining physical form. The resistance hadn't disappeared entirely. It never would. There would always be those who feared change, who wanted the past preserved rather than the future embraced. But they were no longer the dominant voice. The story had shifted. Humanity was no longer a tragedy. It was a work in progress. 3 years after Marcus's first awakening, the population of Homo transcendus reached 217. Settlements dotted the globe, each unique, each thriving in its own way. They'd established formal diplomatic relations with the collectors, traded technology and knowledge, learned to coexist with the beings who had inherited Earth during humanity's long sleep. The last of the sleepers was scheduled to wake in another decade. After that, no more frozen humans waited in preservation pods. Homo transcendus would be complete. Not millions like the old humanity, but hundreds, each one precious, each one carrying abilities that made them irreplaceable. Marcus stood in the central square of the first settlement, officially named Haven, in honor of the living structure that had sheltered them during their most vulnerable time. Around him, changed humans went about their lives, shopping in markets where goods were traded through a mix of old currency and new barter, teaching children, the first generation born to Homo transcendus, babies with abilities manifesting from birth, building, creating, living. Cypher found him there, scales flickering with colors that meant contentment, satisfaction. "Still collecting your story," the collector said. "Still the best decision I ever made." "How does it end?" Marcus asked. "In your collection, in the story you're building, how does humanity's resurrection story end?" Cypher's colors shifted to something warm, almost affectionate. "It doesn't end, Marcus Chen. That's the point. Endings are for extinct species, for dead civilizations, for stories that have finished. Your story is ongoing, open-ended, still being written with every awakening, every birth, every moment you choose to exist rather than fade away." "So we're a work in progress. The best stories always are." Sarah joined them, carrying their daughter. 2 years old, eyes that shifted between human brown and luminescent green depending on her mood, already showing signs of abilities that combined both parents' gifts. She could slow time in small bubbles around herself while simultaneously communicating with plants, creating gardens that grew and shifted in accelerated time streams. She was impossible, miraculous, proof that Homo transcendus could propagate, could continue, could build a future that extended beyond the sleepers who had first awakened. "She's asking for you," Sarah said to Marcus, settling their daughter into his arms. "Wants to show you the flower she grew. It blooms in 4 dimensions, apparently. She's very proud." Marcus held her daughter, felt her tiny hand touch his face, felt time slow around them just slightly, her unconscious manipulation of reality as natural to her as breathing. He looked at Sarah, at Cypher, at the settlement bustling with transformed human life. Dr. Vasquez had left them a message 10,000 years ago. You are not accidents. You are the next chapter. She'd been right, but she'd been incomplete too. They weren't just the next chapter. They were the proof that stories don't have to end when everything changes, that adaptation is a form of survival, that humanity's essential nature, the curiosity, the resilience, the stubborn refusal to accept extinction, could persist even when everything else transformed. "Come on," Marcus said to Sarah and Cypher. "Let's go see this 4-dimensional flower. I want to understand how my daughter is breaking physics before she's even learned to read." They walked together through Haven's living streets, through humanity's newest beginning, under a violet-green sky that would never look like the old Earth, but was home nonetheless. Behind them, the settlement thrived. Ahead, the future waited. Uncertain, strange, full of possibilities no one could predict. And Marcus Chen, the last human to awaken from the old world, the first of a new species, carried his daughter into that unknown future with hope instead of fear. Because humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. Extinction is not the end. It's just an invitation to evolve. The end. We are not the last of what was. We are the first of what will be. And that makes all the difference. From the Chronicles of Homo Transcendus, as collected by Cipher, archivist of Living Stories.